My name is Jenna, and I'm a senior marketing manager for a fantastic software company. I just bought my dream house, a sprawling 4-bedroom oasis near the ocean in Florida. But this isn't a story about a house or even about my career. This is a story about the family I had to leave behind to build it to breathe again. After 30 years of being the invisible child, the forgotten daughter, the family workhorse, I discovered the real reason why they kept me at arm's length. They thought I'd never uncover the truth about their carefully constructed charade about the roles they'd assigned us all. They thought I'd always be their dutiful, compliant, punchline-absorbing Jenna. They were devastatingly wrong. The moment I found out what they really thought of me, what they really wanted from me, or rather didn't want, it felt like the floor beneath me simply vanished. There are truths buried so deep in families, they become ghosts haunting the hallways of your heart. My family, well, they had an entire graveyard of them. And one Christmas, I finally decided to go digging armed with nothing but years of quiet pain and a flicker of desperate hope for anything different. For so long, I craved their approval like a drug. Each holiday, especially Christmas, was another torturous reminder of my designated place on the sidelines in the cold, or worse, as unpaid labor. My heart didn't just break over and over, it slowly turned into a brittle, hollow thing I barely recognized. I remember one Christmas Eve years ago when the reality of my situation slammed into me with the force of a physical blow. I'd arrived at my parents' home, a hopeful 23-year-old, only to find my room given away without a word, leaving me effectively homeless on the most sacred family night of the year. That was the night the first crack appeared in the facade of my denial. If you've ever felt like the black sheep, the one whose achievements are met with silence, while others are showered with praise, if you've ever been made to feel small in the very place you're supposed to belong, comment below and hit that subscribe button. You're not alone in this. My journey was a long and painful one filled with moments that nearly broke me, but what I didn't know then was that this was just the beginning of unraveling a much larger, more complicated tapestry of family secrets and unspoken rules. Trust me, if you've ever yearned for your family's love only to be met with a closed door, or worse, a door deliberately slammed in your face, this story will change how you see family forever. Because sometimes the most loving thing you can do for yourself is to walk away and build your own damn castle brick by painful, liberating brick. To understand why that Christmas Eve 7 years ago was such a pivotal, soul-crushing moment, you need to understand the landscape of my family. It wasn't a Norman Rockwell painting, that's for sure. More like a Picasso, all skewed perspectives and hidden meanings, beautiful in its own twisted way from afar, but deeply unsettling up close. I grew up in a modest suburban house in a state that felt 1,000,000 miles away from the Florida sunshine I now call home. There was my mom and dad, Clara, my elder sister, the golden child, and me, Jenna, the quiet observer, the one who always seemed to be looking in from the outside. My parents weren't overtly cruel, not in the ways you see in movies. They were more casually negligent with my heart. They provided food, shelter, the basics. But the emotional currency in our home, attention, praise, genuine interest, was heavily skewed in Clara's favor. Clara was everything I wasn't, or so I was constantly reminded. She was bubbly, outgoing, effortlessly popular. Her laughter filled the house, a bright tinkling sound that always drew Mom and Dad like moths to a flame. I was the smart one, the responsible one, labels that sounded like compliments but often felt like dismissals. My intelligence was acknowledged, yes, but rarely celebrated. It was almost as if it made them uncomfortable, a quiet challenge to the established order of things. I remember when Clara was in elementary school, her stick figure drawings were hailed as masterpieces and taped prominently on the fridge. My carefully researched science fair project, which won second place in the district, got a cursory, "Oh, that's nice, dear," before Mom hurried off to help Clara with her latest social drama. Clara's school plays, where she often had a non-speaking role as a tree or a background villager, were mandatory family events. We'd all troop in beaming while Dad filmed the entire thing on his clunky camcorder. My debate club championships, where I was a lead speaker, were deemed too long or too complicated for them to attend. "You know your father gets restless, Jenna," Mom would say with a sigh, as if my achievements were an inconvenience. The favoritism wasn't just about attention, it extended to everything. When Clara got a C on her history report card, she burst into tears, and Mom and Dad comforted her, bought her a new bike to cheer her up. When I brought home straight A's, I'd get a pat on the head and a reminder to help your sister with her homework. She's struggling. It was a constant, subtle erosion of my self-worth. Then there was Aunt Linda, Mom's older sister. Aunt Linda was a force of nature, a Category 5 hurricane in human form, critical, judgmental, and with an uncanny ability to make everyone around her walk on eggshells. She held an inexplicable power over my parents. They'd bend over backwards to accommodate her, to appease her, often at my expense. Aunt Linda made no secret of her preference for Clara. Every Christmas, Clara would receive expensive, thoughtful gifts, a delicate silver necklace, a trendy new gadget. I'd get something impersonal like a generic gift basket, or worse, a self-help book subtly hinting at my perceived inadequacies. One year it was The Art of Small Talk, another, Unleash Your Inner Extrovert. I was 12. Mike, Clara's husband, fit right into this dynamic. He worked in business management, a vaguely impressive-sounding title that my parents loved to boast about, even though no one really knew what he did. He was smug, entitled, and treated me with a condescending air, as if I were a slightly dim-witted child. He and Clara were a unit, the shining stars of the family, their lives, their needs always taking precedence. I wasn't a rebellious child. I was quiet, introspective. I loved to read, to write stories, to lose myself in the intricate worlds I found in books. I had an early fascination with computers and technology, teaching myself basic coding when I was a teenager, but these passions were largely ignored. "Jenna's always got her nose in a book," Mom would say with a sigh to visitors, as if it were a character flaw. "She's not very social." No one encouraged my writing. No one asked about my coding projects. It was as if these parts of me didn't exist, or worse, weren't worth acknowledging. The message, though unspoken, was clear. Clara was the one who mattered. I was the supporting act, the stagehand, the one expected to be grateful for any crumbs of attention that fell her way. And for a long, long time, I internalized that message. I believed it. I tried harder. I got better grades, achieved more, hoping that one day they'd finally see me, that one day I'd earn my place in the warmth of their approval. This deep-seated longing for acceptance, for a sense of belonging within my own family, became the driving force of my young life. It was a hunger that never seemed to be satisfied, a wound that never quite healed. And it was this wound that bled profusely that Christmas Eve 7 years ago, the night the illusion of family warmth shattered into a million icy shards. That was the night the pattern truly began, the night I started to realize that perhaps, just perhaps, I was looking for love in all the wrong places. But the full, devastating weight of that realization wouldn't hit me for several more years, not until I was pushed to the very edge of my endurance. Little did I know the path to my own liberation would be paved with even more heartbreak before the dawn. That Christmas Eve 7 years ago wasn't an isolated incident. It was the brutal crystallization of a pattern that had been subtly weaving itself through my life for years. It was the moment the subtext became text, the unspoken became deafeningly loud. I was 23, fresh out of college, working my first real job in marketing. I'd driven hours to be home for Christmas, that familiar ache of hope and dread warring in my chest. I remember walking into my parents' house, a small, hopeful smile on my face, only to find my childhood bedroom, the one I always stayed in, occupied. Not by a visiting relative who needed it more, not by some unavoidable circumstance. It had been given to Mike's parents, Clara's in-laws, who had apparently decided to extend their visit last minute. No one had bothered to tell me. When I asked, bewildered, where I was supposed to sleep, Mom just shrugged, a harried look on her face. "Oh, Jenna, honestly, can't you see how busy I am? We just didn't think. Maybe the sofa." The sofa was lumpy too short, and in the middle of the living room where everyone would be trooping through. Dad just mumbled something about full house and disappeared into the garage. There was no apology, no concern, just dismissal. As if my presence, my comfort, was an afterthought, an inconvenience. The final straw came when Mom flustered. By my quiet distress snapped, "Well, maybe you could find somewhere else to stay, dear. We're just so cramped here. On Christmas Eve. Find somewhere else." The words hung in the air, heavy and cold. I remember the sting of tears, the lump in my throat, so thick I could barely breathe. I didn't argue. I didn't make a scene. I just nodded, picked up my bag, and walked out. I called my high school friend Jessica, who lived nearby. Bless her heart, she welcomed me with open arms, no questions asked, just a warm hug and a comfortable bed. That night, huddled in Jessica's guest room, the sound of her family's cheerful Christmas preparations, a stark contrast to the icy silence from my own, was when the first real crack appeared in my carefully constructed denial. From then on, Christmases at my parents' became a sterile, painful affair. I started booking a room at the local Holiday Inn. "It's just easier, Mom," I'd say, trying to sound breezy. "I don't want to put you out." They never protested. In fact, I think they were relieved. I'd show up on Christmas Day, put on a brave face, help with the cooking and cleaning watch, Clara and her eventual children be showered with gifts and attention, and then retreat to my impersonal hotel room, the loneliness a heavy cloak around my shoulders. This pattern of being overlooked, dismissed, and undervalued wasn't confined to Christmas. It permeated every aspect of my life. My college graduation, Mom and Dad were late. They'd gotten caught up in one of Clara's emergencies, a fight with Mike, if I recall. They left before the ceremony even ended. "Clara needs us, honey. You understand." I didn't not really, but I nodded, swallowed the disappointment, and posed for pictures with Jessica's beaming family instead. My first big promotion at work, the one I'd worked tirelessly for, was met with a distracted, "Oh, that's nice, dear. Did you hear Clara's pregnant again? We're so thrilled." My achievements were like pebbles dropped into a vast ocean, disappearing without a ripple. Clara's life, on the other hand, was a constant stream of celebrated milestones. Her engagement party was an extravagant affair my parents co-hosted. Her wedding was the event of the year. Her pregnancies, her children's birthdays, Mike's supposed promotions at his nebulous business management job, all were causes for grand celebrations, endless fawning and family gatherings, where I was once again relegated to the role of helpful, smiling wallpaper. My internal monologue during those years was a relentless cycle of self-doubt and quiet despair. Am I invisible, I'd wonder, staring at my reflection in the hotel mirror each Christmas? Or am I just not worth seeing? The ache in my chest became a permanent resident, a dull, throbbing reminder of the love I craved and never received. What's wrong with me, I'd ask myself again and again. Why am I so easy to forget I remember one Christmas dinner, a couple of years after the hotel tradition began? Aunt Linda was in rare form, her sharp eyes scanning me up and down as I sat at the table. Marketing Jenna. Is that even a real job? She'd sniffed, her voice dripping with disdain. It sounds so frivolous. Not like Mike's work. Now that's a proper career. Business management. Solid. I tried to explain my role, the complexities of digital strategy, the satisfaction of a successful campaign, but her eyes glazed over. My parents predictably said nothing. Dad busied himself with his turkey, and Mom just offered Aunt Linda more wine. Clara giggled a little too loudly at something Mike whispered in her ear. I felt a familiar wave of heat creep up my neck, a mixture of anger and humiliation. I wanted to scream, to demand they see me, hear me, defend me, but the words caught in my throat, choked by years of conditioned silence. Another time, I called Mom, excited to share some good news about a project I'd spearheaded at work, one that had garnered industry recognition. "That's interesting, dear," she'd said, her voice distant. Before I could elaborate, she cut in, "Listen, Jenna, I can't talk long. Clara's having a bit of a meltdown. Little Mikey has a slight fever, and she's convinced it's something serious. You know how she gets. My news, my success, instantly forgotten." I hung up the phone, the silence in my apartment amplifying the hollowness inside me. Jessica was my lifeline during these years. She'd listen patiently to my tearful rants, offer unwavering support, and remind me of my worth when I couldn't see it myself. "You're amazing, Jen," she'd say. "They're the ones missing out, not you." The most recent major disappointment, the one that finally pushed me towards a seismic shift, happened last Christmas. I'd steeled myself for the usual routine, the holiday inn, the forced cheerfulness, the feeling of being an outsider looking in. But this time there was a new, crueler twist. A few days before Christmas, Mom called. "Jenna, dear," she began, her voice hesitant about Christmas Day. "Aunt Linda is going to be here, you know. And, well, she gets a bit agitated sometimes. You know how she can be." I weighted my stomach tightening. So perhaps Mom continued, her voice barely a whisper. "Perhaps it might be better if you didn't come for the gift exchange this year, just to keep the peace. You could come later for dinner, maybe, not come for the gift exchange. On Christmas Day, because my presence agitated my aunt, the aunt who had bullied me my entire life, the aunt whose approval my parents valued more than my feelings." The words hit me harder than any physical blow. It wasn't just about being overlooked anymore. This was active exclusion. This was being told unequivocally that I was the problem, that my very existence was a source of conflict. I don't remember what I said. I think I just mumbled a numb, "okay," and hung up. I didn't go for dinner either. I checked out of the Holiday Inn on Christmas morning, drove back to my small Florida apartment, and cried for hours. It was a deep, racking grief for the family I'd never had, for the love I'd never received. But somewhere in that ocean of pain, a tiny, rebellious spark ignited. A spark of anger, a spark of defiance, a spark that whispered, "Enough." This time, something had to change, and that something I was slowly beginning to realize had to be me. The fallout from last Christmas wasn't immediate or explosive. It was more like a slow, creeping frost, numbing the already tenuous connections I had with my family. I didn't call them to explain why I hadn't shown up for dinner. They didn't call to ask. The silence stretched for weeks, then months. When Mom finally did call, it was all small talk, a careful tiptoeing around the elephant in the room. I kept my responses brief, polite, distant. The guilt trip started subtly. "We missed you at Easter, Jenna. Clara's kids ask about their Aunt Jenna." I'd offer non-committal replies, refusing to be drawn back into the old dance of apology and appeasement. Clara, never one for subtlety, took to social media. Vague, passive-aggressive posts started appearing on her perfectly curated Facebook feed. Family isn't always easy, but some of us still make an effort, or so sad when people forget what's truly important in life. #family over everything. I knew they were aimed at me. For a moment, the old Jenna, the one desperate for approval, wanted to respond, to defend herself. But the new, emerging Jenna, the one who'd cried herself empty last Christmas, simply unfollowed her. It was a small act of defiance, but it felt strangely empowering. Meanwhile, my career, the one Aunt Linda had dismissed as frivolous, was taking off. I poured all my energy, all my frustrated ambition into my work. I loved the challenge, the creativity, the tangible results, and it paid off. I was offered a promotion to senior marketing manager, a role with significantly more responsibility and a substantial pay raise. I remember staring at the offer letter, a genuine smile spreading across my face for what felt like the first time in ages. I celebrated with Jessica, who flew down to Florida for a weekend. We toasted with champagne, not in a stuffy hotel room, but in my sunny little apartment filled with hope and the promise of a brighter future. That promotion was a catalyst. It wasn't just about the money or the title. It was a validation, a proof that I was capable, that I was valuable, even if my own family couldn't see it. Around the same time, on Jessica's gentle urging, I started therapy. It was tough unpacking years of emotional baggage, dissecting the complicated dynamics of my family. My therapist helped me understand that their behavior wasn't a reflection of my worth, but of their own unresolved issues, their own ingrained patterns. I began to wonder about my parents' own childhoods. Had Mom been the scapegoat in her family, too, forever trying to win the approval of a critical parent, now projecting that onto me? Was Dad's passivity a learned helplessness? A way of avoiding conflict that he'd witnessed growing up? I even tried asking Mom about her relationship with Aunt Linda once years ago. She'd clammed up immediately, a shuttered look in her eyes. Linda's always been strong-willed, was all she'd said. Understanding their motivations wouldn't excuse their actions, but perhaps it could offer a path to a different kind of peace, one not dependent on their change, but on my own acceptance of reality. The biggest shift, however, was happening within me. The anger that had sparked last Christmas was slowly morphing into a quiet resolve. I started to dream of a life where I wasn't constantly bracing for the next disappointment, the next casual cruelty. A life where I set the terms. A life filled with peace, joy, and genuine connection. And then the idea took root. A crazy, audacious idea. I had savings, a good income. Why not create my own sanctuary? I started looking at houses, not just any houses, but houses in Florida near the ocean, a place that felt like the antithesis of the cramped, emotionally suffocating environment I associated with my family home. A place where I could finally breathe. The search became my secret project, my quiet rebellion. Jessica was my confidant, cheering me on every step of the way. After months of searching, I found it a beautiful, spacious 4-bedroom house, bathed in sunlight with a lush garden and a glimpse of the ocean from the master bedroom. It was more than I'd ever dreamed of. Putting in the offer, getting it accepted, signing the papers, it all felt surreal, like I was watching myself in a movie. This wasn't just a house, it was a statement. It was me choosing myself. I closed on the house in late October. I spent November decorating, filling it with things I loved, colors that made me happy. For the first time in my life, I felt a profound sense of peace, of belonging. This was my space, built on my own terms, a testament to my resilience. As Thanksgiving approached, the familiar dread about Christmas began to creep in. But this year, it was different. It was overlaid with a new sense of power, a secret knowledge. I hadn't told my family about the house. I wasn't sure when or if I would. Then one crisp November evening, my phone rang. Eeing. It was Mom. Her voice was cheerful, deceptively light. "Jenna, dear, just calling to chat about Christmas plans. You know Aunt Linda has already confirmed she's coming to us this year. She's so looking forward to it." I stood in my new sun-drenched living room, the scent of fresh paint still lingering in the air, and took a deep breath. The old Jenna would have felt that familiar knot of anxiety, the immediate urge to accommodate, to minimize herself. But as I listened to my mother's voice, a strange calmness settled over me. So Mom continued her voice, taking on that familiar, slightly wheedling tone. "We were thinking it would be lovely if you could make it. Of course, we understand if it's difficult." Difficult. That was the word she always used. A euphemism for, "We don't really want you if it causes any trouble with Linda." I looked around my beautiful, peaceful home, my sanctuary, my future. A smile touched my lips, a real one. "Actually, Mom," I began, my voice steady, clear, "I have some news." Little did I know the biggest storm was yet to come. But this time, I wasn't standing in the rain defenseless. This time, I had built my own shelter, and I was ready. News, Mom's voice on the other end of the line, was laced with a faint, almost imperceptible surprise. I rarely had news that she considered significant, not unless it directly involved Clara or some family-approved milestone I'd miraculously achieved. "Yes, Mom," I said, a newfound confidence thrumming in my veins. "I won't be coming up for Christmas this year. I bought a house." Silence. For a moment, I thought the call had dropped. Then a hesitant, "A house." "You bought a house," where there was no excitement in her voice, no maternal pride, just surprise and perhaps a hint of something else I couldn't quite decipher. Suspicion. Here in Florida, I continued, keeping my tone light, almost casual. "It's near the ocean, a lovely 4-bedroom place. I'm actually planning on hosting Christmas here this year, just a quiet one with some friends." Another beat of silence. Then Mom's voice suddenly animated, but not in the way I'd hoped. "Oh, Jenna, a house in Florida. How wonderful. That's just marvelous. Dear." Her enthusiasm felt forced, a little too bright. Well, that actually works out perfectly. Absolutely perfectly. I frowned. Perfectly? What do you mean? Well, she chirped, we can all come to you for Christmas. It'll be a lovely change of scenery. Aunt Linda will be thrilled. She's always wanted to visit Florida. And Clara and Mike, they've already booked their tickets to fly into our state, but I'm sure they can change them. A Florida Christmas. What a splendid idea, Jenna. My stomach dropped. The audacity, the sheer unadulterated entitlement. They hadn't even asked. They just assumed. Assumed my home was their new vacation destination. Assumed my life, my plans were merely an extension of theirs. This was the revelation. Not some dark family secret unearthed from a dusty attic, but this glaring, undeniable truth about how they saw me, not as an independent adult with her own life, her own boundaries, but as a resource, a convenience, an extension of their will. The realization hit me like a freight train loaded with years of accumulated pain and dismissed feelings. My beautiful new home, my sanctuary, was already being invaded, colonized, before I'd even had a chance to truly settle in. For years, I'd chased their approval, their acknowledgement. I'd twisted myself into knots, trying to be what they wanted, or at least what I thought they wanted. And now the truth was laid bare. They didn't see me at all. They saw a solution to their Christmas logistics, a free Florida vacation, a way to appease Aunt Linda. The pain of it was sharp, but strangely clarifying. It was the final brutal severing of a cord I hadn't even realized was still attached. My emotional processing was a whirlwind. There was a surge of the old hurt, the familiar sting of being taken for granted, but beneath it, something new was rising, a cold, hard anger, a defiant strength. My therapist's words echoed in my mind. You cannot change them, Jenna. You can only change how you respond. You have the power to set your own boundaries. My internal monologue shifted from bewildered pain to steely resolve. No, not this time, not anymore. This is my home, my life. They will not bulldoze their way in here. The truth wasn't some hidden family secret that needed to be whispered. The truth was that I deserved better. The truth was that I was done. The decision to take action wasn't a hesitant, fearful one. It was a calm, certain click into place. I would say no. I would use their own tactics, their own excuses against them. I would protect my peace, my hard-won sanctuary at all costs. The planning and preparation phase wasn't elaborate. It was mostly internal. I rehearsed the words in my head over and over. No, that won't be possible. There's no room. I anticipated their reactions, the shock, the disbelief, the guilt-tripping, the anger. I steeled myself for the onslaught. Jessica, when I told her about Mom's call, was indignant on my behalf. You absolutely have to say no, Jen. This is your line in the sand. Her unwavering support was a lifeline. I made plans for my own Christmas. I invited Jessica and a few other close friends who had become my chosen family in Florida. We'd cook together, watch cheesy Christmas movies, relax by the pool. A peaceful, joyful Christmas. My Christmas. The anticipation for the inevitable confrontation hung in the air. I knew it wouldn't be long. Mom had sounded so certain, so confident that their Florida Christmas extravaganza was a done deal. I waited for the next call, the one where they'd inform me of their arrival details, their demands. And when it came, I would be ready. The game had changed. The power had shifted. And they had no idea. This wasn't just about a house or a holiday. This was about reclaiming my life. This was my truth bomb, and I was ready to drop it. The call came a few days later. It was Clara, my sister, her voice bubbling with an almost manic excitement. Jenna, oh my God, Mom told me about your new place in Florida. It sounds amazing. We're all so excited. We've already changed our tickets. We're flying into Fort Lauderdale on the 22nd. Mike is thrilled. He's already looking up golf courses. And the kids are practically bouncing off the walls about seeing the ocean. You're a lifesaver, seriously. Trying to cram everyone into Mom and Dad's place with Aunt Linda was going to be a nightmare. I listened, my hand gripping the phone so tightly my knuckles were white. A lifesaver. A free Florida vacation package, more like. The casual assumption that my home, My life was theirs to commandeer sent a fresh wave of fury through me. But I kept my voice calm, measured. "Clara," I said, cutting through her excited chatter, "there seems to be a misunderstanding." "Misunderstanding?" Her voice lost some of its exuberance. "What do you mean Mom said it was all settled? We're coming to your place for Christmas." "No, Clara." I stated each word clear and deliberate. "That won't be possible." Silence. Then a sharp, incredulous laugh. "What are you kidding me? What do you mean not possible? You have a 4-bedroom house, Jenna." "Mom said so." "Yes, I do," I replied evenly. "But there's no room." The line went dead quiet. I could almost hear the gears grinding in her head, the disbelief warring with indignation. "No room," she finally sputtered. "What the hell does that mean, no room? Are you serious?" "Perfectly serious, Clara," I said, the echo of my mother's dismissive words from 7 years ago ringing in my ears. But this time I was the one uttering them. "I have plans. My house is full." What followed was an explosion. Clara went from shocked to furious in seconds, full of what, Jenna? "Your imaginary friends, after everything Mom and Dad do for you, for us. You're being incredibly selfish. This is family. You can't just say no room to your own family at Christmas. Actually," "Clara," I said, my voice hardening, "I can. And I am. You, Mom. Dad, Mike, and Aunt Linda seem to forget that this is my home. You didn't ask if you could stay. You just assumed. You booked tickets. You made plans. Just like you've always done, assuming I'll just go along with whatever suits you." Her outrage was palpable. "I can't believe you. You're unbelievable. Mom and Dad will be devastated." Aunt Linda was so looking forward to it. "Aunt Linda's feelings are not my responsibility," I said, a lifetime of resentment finally finding its voice. "And frankly, Clara, neither are yours, nor Mom's, nor Dad's, when you all behave like this." She hung up on me, or rather, she slammed the phone down so hard I imagined it cracking. The next call was from Mom, predictably. Her voice was trembling, a mixture of tears and anger. "Jenna, what is this?" I hear from Clara. "You told her there's no room. How could you? After we were all so excited. After Aunt Linda." "Mom," I interrupted, my patience wearing thin. "Do you remember 7 years ago, Christmas Eve, when I came home from college and you'd given my room away to Mike's parents without telling me? And when I asked where I was supposed to sleep, you told me to find somewhere else because you were so cramped." A choked silence. "Then a week that was different, Jenna. We didn't mean..." "Different how, Mom?" I pressed. "Because it was me. Because my comfort, my feelings didn't matter then, and they don't matter now. You didn't think twice about leaving me effectively homeless on Christmas Eve. But now that the shoe is on the other foot, it's a catastrophe." "You're twisting things," she cried. "This is about family, about togetherness. No, Mom," I said firmly. "This is about respect, something I've rarely received from this family. My house, my rules. And my rule is, you don't invite yourself and your entourage to stay with me without even asking, especially not when that entourage includes Aunt Linda, the woman who has made it her life's mission to criticize and belittle me." My father got on the phone, then his voice gruff, unfamiliar in its attempt at authority. "Jenna, this isn't like you. Your mother is very upset. Just let us come. Don't make this difficult." Difficult, I almost laughed. Dad, my entire life in this family has been difficult. "I'm just choosing not to participate in the difficulty anymore." The answer is no. The calls kept coming. Guilt trips, accusations. Clara launched a smear campaign on social media, posting cryptic messages about ungrateful relatives and people who forget where they came from. Some distant relatives, undoubtedly spurred on by Clara or Mom, sent me messages urging me to do the right thing and not tear the family apart. Then came the call I'd been both dreading and in a strange way anticipating. Aunt Linda. Her voice, when I answered, was like nails on a chalkboard laced with a saccharine sweetness that was more menacing than any overt anger. "Jenna dear," she cooed, "your mother tells me there's been a little misunderstanding about Christmas. I'm sure we can sort it out. I was so looking forward to seeing your new little place in Florida." I took a deep breath. This was it, the final boss. Aunt Linda. I said, my voice surprisingly steady. There's no misunderstanding. My home is not available for your Christmas vacation. Her tone sharpened instantly. Now see here, young lady. You have a responsibility to your family. Your parents are very upset. And frankly, after all they've done for you, after all they've done for me, I cut her off the dam of years of pent-up resentment finally breaking. What about what you've done, Aunt Linda? For years, you've criticized me, belittled me, made me feel worthless. You've poisoned this family with your negativity and your bullying. You are the reason I dreaded every family gathering. You are the reason my mother asked me not to attend my own family's Christmas gift exchange last year because my presence agitated you. There was a stunned silence on the other end. I don't think anyone had ever spoken to Aunt Linda like that before. Well, I never, she finally gasped, sputtering with indignation. Yes, you never considered my feelings, did you? I pressed on a strange sense of calm washing over me. You never considered the impact of your words. Well, I'm considering them now. And I'm telling you, Aunt Linda, your reign of terror in this family ends now. At least it ends with me. You are not welcome in my home. Not for Christmas, not ever. I heard a strangled noise, then the distinct sound of the call being disconnected. I hung up my hand, trembling slightly, but a wave of profound, exhilarating relief washed over me. I had done it. I had faced them all, confronted the toxicity head-on, and stood my ground. The power dynamic hadn't just shifted, it had been completely upended. Clara's social media posts continued for a while, but something had changed. A few of her own friends and even a distant cousin who I barely knew started posting subtle comments defending the idea of boundaries or questioning the vagueness of her complaints. It seemed my quiet revolution was having ripple effects I hadn't anticipated. My parents stopped calling for a few days. The silence was heavy, but it was also peaceful. I knew this wasn't the end of it, not really, but it was the end of their control over me. I had found my voice, my strength. I had drawn my line in the sand, and for the first time in my life, I felt truly, unequivocally liberated. My beautiful Florida home, my sanctuary remained mine, and Christmas this year would be on my terms, peaceful, joyful, free. The days following the great Christmas confrontation were a strange mix of calm and lingering tension. The barrage of angry calls and texts ceased, replaced by an unnerving silence from my immediate family. It was the kind of quiet that precedes a storm, or perhaps the quiet after one is finally past, leaving behind a landscape irrevocably altered. Clara's passive-aggressive social media campaign fizzled out. After a few more vague posts about selfishness and family disappointment, which garnered less sympathy and more questioning comments than she probably anticipated, she went quiet too. I later heard from a cousin Sarah, one who had reached out privately to express her admiration for my stance, that Clara's attempts to rally the extended family against me had largely backfired. Apparently, Aunt Linda's tyrannical ways were more widely resented than I'd ever known, and my open defiance had emboldened others, even if only in whispers. Jessica, my rock, was overjoyed. "You did it, Jen. You actually did it." She cheered when I recounted the final conversation with Aunt Linda. "I'm so incredibly proud of you. This is huge." We spent hours on the phone dissecting every call, every reaction. Her validation was like a balm to the lingering rawness of the conflict. My parents attempted one more round of emotional blackmail a week later. It was Mom, her voice thick with unshed tears. "Jenna, your father and I, we're just so heartbroken. You're tearing this family apart. Christmas will never be the same." The old Jenna would have crumbled, consumed by guilt. But the new Jenna, the one forged in the fires of years of disappointment and recent confrontation, held firm. "Mom," I said, my voice gentle but resolute, "I'm not tearing the family apart. I'm trying to save myself. And perhaps if you really think about it, this family was already deeply fractured. I'm just refusing to keep pretending it wasn't. Christmas won't be the same for me, you're right. It will be peaceful, and I deserve that." I told her I loved her, which was true despite everything. but I also told her that my decision was final. I needed space, and I needed them to respect my boundaries. If they could do that, perhaps in time we could find a new way to connect. But the old way was over. Unexpected support came from surprising quarters. Mike's mother, Clara's mother-in-law, the one whose extended visit had inadvertently triggered my Christmas Eve eviction 7 years prior, sent me a carefully worded email. She didn't mention the current drama directly, but she spoke of the importance of individual happiness and respecting an adult child's choices. She even subtly alluded to finding Aunt Linda a challenging personality. It wasn't a full-throated endorsement, but it was a quiet acknowledgement that I wasn't entirely alone in my assessment of the family dynamics. As Christmas approached, my Florida home, instead of being a battleground, became a haven. Jessica flew in a few days before, and we were joined by 2 other close friends. We decorated the house not with the oppressive weight of tradition and obligation, but with laughter and genuine joy. We cooked a feast, exchanged thoughtful gifts, watched terrible Christmas movies, and lounged by the pool soaking up the Florida sun. It was the most peaceful, joyful, and liberating Christmas of my entire life. There were moments, of course, a fleeting pang of sadness for the family. I wished I had the idealized Christmas I'd always longed for. But those moments were quickly overshadowed by the overwhelming sense of relief and contentment. I was free. I posted a few pictures on my private social media, me and my friends smiling, relaxed in my beautiful new home. I didn't mention my family drama, but the caption read, "Choosing peace and joy this Christmas." So grateful for chosen family and new beginnings. # my Florida Christmas, # boundaries are beautiful. The outpouring of love and support from my friends and even some acquaintances who knew snippets of my struggles was immense. It reinforced my decision, my sense of having done the right thing for myself. The immediate aftermath wasn't about gloating or revenge. It was about survival, about carving out a space where I could finally thrive. The victory wasn't in their defeat, but in my own liberation. I was processing the enormous emotional weight of it all with the help of Jessica and my therapist. There was grief, yes, for the family I was losing, or at least the relationship I'd always known. But there was also an exhilarating sense of empowerment of finally being the author of my own story. The old Jenna was gone. In her place stood a woman who knew her worth, who wasn't afraid to protect her peace, and who was for the first time looking towards the future with genuine hope and excitement. The path ahead was uncertain, but it was mine. And that made all the difference. 2 years. That's how long it had been since the Christmas showdown, as Jessica affectionately called it. 2 years since I'd reclaimed my life, my peace, my sanity. And in those 2 years, everything had changed. My career continued to flourish. I was now a senior marketing manager leading a dynamic team, spearheading innovative campaigns for the software company I loved. The work was challenging, fulfilling, and I was good at it. My Florida home, my sanctuary, had become even more beautiful, filled with plants, art, and the laughter of friends. The ocean breeze was a constant, gentle reminder of the tranquility I'd fought so hard to achieve. I'd even started dating someone wonderful, Mark, a kind, intelligent architect who respected my independence and cherished my strength. He knew my story, and he admired the woman I'd become. But what about them, my family? Well, karma, as they say, has a way of working things out, often in ways you least expect. Aunt Linda's reign of terror had significantly diminished. After my public within the family, at least confrontation, other relatives had apparently found their courage. Cousin Sarah told me that Aunt Linda's pronouncements were no longer met with terrified silence, but with polite pushback or even outright disagreement. Her power, built on fear and intimidation, had crumbled when someone finally dared to say no. She was more isolated now, her Christmases reportedly much quieter, and from what I heard, rather lonely. Justice wasn't always loud and dramatic. Sometimes it was the slow, inevitable consequence of one's own actions. Clara's perfect life had begun to show some cracks. Mike's vaunted business management career had hit a snag. Turns out it wasn't as stable or high-paying as my parents had always proclaimed. Their financial situation became strained, and the pressure took a toll on their marriage. Clara's social media presence became less about bragging and more subdued. I didn't revel in her struggles, but there was a quiet sense of vindication in knowing that the facade she'd so carefully constructed wasn't immune to reality. She still rarely contacted me directly, our relationship remaining distant and polite, a fragile truce born of necessity rather than genuine reconciliation. My parents, well, that was more complicated. The first year after the confrontation was hard. They were hurt, angry, and confused. They struggled to understand my perspective, still caught in the web of obligation and fear that Aunt Linda had woven. But time, and perhaps the undeniable evidence of my happiness and success, had a softening effect. My mother, to my utter astonishment, had started therapy. She'd tentatively reached out to me, not with accusations or guilt trips, but with quiet, hesitant apologies. They weren't perfect apologies still tinged with a desire to excuse past behavior, but they were a start. I maintained my boundaries firmly but kindly. They visited me in Florida once, staying in a nearby hotel, not my house. It was awkward, but also a step forward. We had dinner talked, and for the first time I felt like they were seeing me, Jenna the adult, not just the problematic daughter. Dad was quieter than usual, but he looked at me with a new kind of respect in his eyes. The dynamic was forever changed. The old toxic patterns were broken. Christmas was now on my terms. Sometimes a peaceful celebration with friends in Florida, sometimes a short, carefully managed visit to see my parents, always with my well-being as the priority. I'd also built a strong, vibrant, chosen family in Florida. Jessica was, of course, a constant, but my circle of friends had expanded. We supported each other, celebrated each other's victories, and offered comfort during setbacks. These were relationships built on mutual respect, love, and genuine connection. Everything I'd craved from my biological family and finally found elsewhere. Looking back on my journey, I felt a profound sense of gratitude. The path had been excruciatingly painful at times, filled with moments of doubt and despair. But standing up for myself, choosing my own happiness over toxic family dynamics, was the single most empowering decision I had ever made. It hadn't just changed my circumstances, it had changed me. I was no longer the invisible girl, the forgotten daughter. I was Jenna, strong, resilient, happy, and free. The lessons learned were etched into my soul. Self-worth is non-negotiable. Boundaries are essential, and sometimes the greatest act of love is to walk away and build your own damn castle exactly the way you want it. And from the sunny balcony of mine overlooking the sparkling ocean, the view was absolutely breathtaking. My story isn't just about a disastrous Christmas or a dysfunctional family. It's about the quiet strength that resides within each of us, the courage it takes to break cycles, and the profound liberation that comes from choosing yourself even when it's the hardest thing you'll ever do. The moral of this story, if I had to distill it, is multi-layered. Your worth is not and never will be determined by how your family treats you. You are inherently worthy of love, respect, and happiness just as you are. Setting boundaries isn't selfish. It's an act of profound self-preservation and self-love. And sometimes, walking away from toxic relationships, even with family, is the only way to find your peace and build a life that truly nourishes your soul. I often wonder if I hadn't reached that breaking point, if I hadn't found the courage to say no, where would I be today? Still stuck in that cycle of pain and disappointment, still shrinking myself to fit into a mold that was never meant for me. Have you ever had to choose between family loyalty and your own sanity? What would you have done in my situation? What boundaries have you struggled to set in your own life? If this story resonated with you, if you've ever felt unseen, unheard, or unappreciated by those who should have cherished you most, please like this story and hit that subscribe button. You are not alone. Share this with someone who needs to hear that it's okay to prioritize their well-being, that they deserve to build their own happiness, even if it means upsetting the status quo. And please comment with your own experiences, your own stories of struggle and triumph. Let's create a community here, a space where we can support each other, validate each other, and celebrate the courage it takes to heal and thrive. My journey to self-discovery and building a life I love is ongoing, and I'll be sharing more about it, the ups, the downs, the lessons learned along the way. Remember, you are the architect of your own life. You hold the blueprint. Don't be afraid to tear down walls that confine you and build bridges to the future you deserve. Go build your own damn castle. You've got this. Stay tuned for more.